Hey everybody, this is my 125 gallon New World tank, and yesterday I shot a video where I put my trap in there, my minnow trap, and I also got out my dip net and I got in there and I removed a few fish, and I talked about how we would later shoot some more video where I would get in there and remove a few more fish. Unfortunately, we are not going to have the video where I removed a few more fish, because after I finished shooting the other video, I just kept right on going. Since I had the nets in my hand and I was in the middle of doing it anyway, I just continued on. So it became quite an ordeal, and I wound up rearranging the tank a little bit. So let's just go over everything that we did and all the fish I removed and how the adjustments got made. As well as my emotional state as I went through the whole process, because that's worth talking about too. Once I finished up what I thought was the fish I was going to be removing, I realized I had left at least one creek chub. You can kind of see him right there, dead center of your screen, that sort of big fish right in the middle there. That is a creek chub, and the one kind of right behind it that's fairly large is a creek chub as well. So those two definitely need to come out of here. The other ones, these little brown striped minnows, are some sort of Neotropus species. They're similar to a black-nosed dace. I don't think they actually are black-nosed dace, but they are very similar and closely related. So again, I just call them Neotropus species. It's some Neotropus species. I don't know. They're all so similar. So those can stay. I am going to have to get these two remaining creek chubs out of there. And I also wanted to get some of the suckerfish out of the tank. I had 3 white suckerfish. I had a large one, a medium one, and then a small one that was not very healthy. Had some kind of health issues going on. I don't really know what that was all about, but it definitely had something going on. So I caught the small one, and then I caught what I thought was the large one. I just had the opportunity to grab it. It practically swam into my net, so I took it. And only later did I realize that was the medium one. So we got both of them out of the tank, and we are down to simply one large white suckerfish, which you can see right there. You might notice that we can now see underneath of this log right here, which is new. For my regular viewers, you'll know that that's new. And you might also notice that that giant rock that I used to keep in the end of this piece of wood right there is gone. I took that out of there. I also moved this piece of wood. I attached some of that Anubias to it, made a few changes that way. And then because of the way this log moved, the big log, I had to actually move the way the smaller one sits ever so slightly. And we'll get into that in a minute. But when I took the rock out of there, it still really wants to float. But I was able to take the whole thing and push it even further this way and slide it down. And it is now sort of wedged under the brace right there. If you'll remember, I had a fairly large rock sitting up here on the corner, and the wood was actually sitting way up here onto that rock. So I was able to bring that all the way down, but of course it also brought it out, and we are now touching the tank. I could not possibly get this wedged in there any tighter. It's jammed into that corner right there, and it is jammed into this corner right here, and it's still trying to float. And so it's not entirely on the bottom. There's a lot of room underneath of it now, which I like. You can actually see there's room underneath of it all the way to the end. And the end of the wood is sort of sitting right here on this rock. And then I just kind of laid that rock on top of there. That's not holding it down. It's just sort of blending that line so it's not so abruptly just ending right there. But of course the top of it, you can see, ends very abruptly and gives all of that swimming space for the fish. So the rock I took out of there, I kept telling everybody it was a big rock. That's the rock. I could just about pick it up with one hand. That probably weighs 30 pounds, 40 pounds. Well, maybe not 40 pounds, but I bet it weighs every bit of 25 to 30. So that's what was in there holding that down. So not only do we not have all of that sight being blocked, I mean, that's just a big chunk of rock that was blocking our view. It also took up a lot of space. So removing that was always my goal. It was only in there ever to hold that down. So now that it's out, we've definitely got some more swimming around room. We can swim around underneath of it now. We can actually see underneath of it this way. I think some of the fish are a little less happy about it, like my big pleco down there doesn't have quite as much place to hide anymore. But they'll get used to it, they'll get over it. So when I started trying to get the creek chub out of there, it was just giving me a fit. I mean, if you were a small, wily little fish that didn't want to get caught in a net, this would be a pretty good tank to be in as far as places to hide. And then I got these bars that block me from just going from one end to the other. And so I started out very calm, very patient. I was just trying to ease the fish into the net. And of course it would just go into hiding somewhere and I couldn't do anything about it. I'd have to get the net under there and root around. And, you know, of course the whole time I'm stirring up all the mumm and I'm scooping up nets full of rocks and I'm having to dump all the gravel out of my net. And the fish are in there freaking out and they're all going to one end of the tank until I get down, you know, wherever the chub was is where I was following. And so the fish were all freaking out. And it just got more and more intense. You know, I was getting more and more aggressive. I was getting angry. I was getting frustrated. And eventually I got to the point where I was aggressively trying to get the fish out of there. I mean, I was knocking stuff over with the net, just trying to grab it. I didn't care if I banged into it with the net. I found myself thinking along the lines of if I just whack it with the net hard enough, I could stun it. And, you know, or maybe I could just chase it around so vigorously I'd just exhaust it. And at some point I had to just stop and think about the way I was thinking about this and just put the nets down and walk away. You know, if you want to say the fish defeated me, that's fine. It certainly did. But I was to the point where not only was I willing and possibly even intending to injure or kill this fish to get it out of the tank, I was putting all the other fish in the tank at risk as well. They were all getting stressed out, and all the mumm and crud and crap that was all swirled up, and the fish were dashing into stuff and banging into things. And one of the silver dollars actually has some white markings on its forehead. It already had some there. I think it had crashed into something already, but that seemed like it was getting worse. Whether that's some kind of infection already or whether it's just a physical injury. If it is a physical injury, me, you know, stirring up a bunch of crud and, you know, stressing the fish out and getting more bacteria in the water column is not going to help. And so eventually, like I said, I just put the nets down and walked away. We will try again some other day when I'm more in the mood and ready to do it. But it's that one there that defeated me. And then I never even tried for this one. I was just determined I was going to get that big one out of the tank. And of course, I never did. So those are the only two fish that need to come out of the tank, is those two chubs. And then other than that, we're done removing fish. And I may add more angelfish. I really, really like the way this angelfish looks in this tank. And I know I've got a lot of angelfish, and I got angelfish in like 7 or 8 of my tanks. But I like angelfish, and so why wouldn't I put more angelfish in my tanks? If I could find something similar, I would love to have something like a discus or some discus in this tank. I know they're a schooling fish, and it would be, advisable to have a group of them. But I don't really think this tank is suitable for discus in a variety of ways, and so that's not something I'm really thinking about. Other than that, I really don't know what kind of fish I would put in there other than more angelfish. It would have to be either a South American or a North American, New World type fish. And it would have to be something, color scheme wise, it would have to be, I'm not looking for bright, vibrant, tropical looking colors. I'm looking for, earth tones and silvers and browns and, colors like we've got in there already. I wouldn't mind a little splash of color, but that's probably going to come in the form of either neons or cardinals or glow light tetras. Something like that will get put in here, and that'll give us a little splash of color. I don't want any, bright, flashy, vibrant colored fish that would really sort of wreck the feel of the tank. So that just keeps bringing me back to angelfish. Of course, angelfish don't really get along for the most part as a rule of thumb, so having a group of them in the tank would be difficult. I'd either have to go with a lot of them so that none of them could establish territory, or I'd have to go with maybe like one more or maybe 2 more. Maybe I could work out 3 of them in a 125. But 2 in a 55 seemed to be pushing the boundaries of how many I could keep. And ultimately one day those 2 started fighting. And so after about 4 years of being together, I had to separate the 2 in my 55. So I've only got 1 in my 55. And I don't currently have any tanks that have more than 1 angelfish in them. Even this 125-gallon tank only has that 1 angelfish in there. So we'll have to wait and see. I don't know. But that, in a nutshell, very large nutshell, is my update on my new, the new look and feel of my new world tank here. I also took the rocks off of the top. I did that while I was in there. I don't know if you remember, some of you may remember, I had rocks like this. This is the one that was sitting on the corner that had the wood propped up on it. That was over here. And then right at these sort of square, unnatural looking black plastic junctions, I would take a rock like this, you know, and just sort of sit it across here or sit it at an angle, and it would just sort of disrupt that, you know, unnatural 90-degree angle feel. But for obvious reasons, while I was in there with the nets and doing all that stuff, I took them all down. I even had one sitting on this corner here. You can see these two rocks right here are those. So I don't know if I'm going to put them back or not. I always had a feeling they're going to get bumped into and knocked over at one point, and that could be bad. So I don't know. Anyway, I feel like I'm rambling at this point. I feel like we've had a good enough look at the tank, and we've got a pretty good idea of what's going on in there now. So make sure you're subscribed. You don't want to miss anything I got coming up. As I've said before, I am going to try to put out a little more content here in the very near future. I know a lot of us are going to be spending a lot more time indoors and whatnot, so I will do my part to try to provide you with at least a little bit more entertainment, something to watch. So there you go. Make sure you're subscribed. That way you won't miss any of that or anything else. Thanks again, and I'll see you real soon in the next one.